Hello and welcome on France 24. I'm Clarisse Fortuné and this is Eye on Africa, our top stories. It's now official. The majority of Kenyan MPs voted to impeach Deputy President. The motion accused Rigathi Gachagua of corruption and many other charges. The culmination of months of open conflict between Gachagua and President William Ruto. The civil war might be over in northern Ethiopia, but the fear remains 2 years on, as unexploded ordnance poses severe risks for civilians, especially children. Africa First focus for the Africa Cinema Summit. Big players are in Ghana's capital to throw the spotlight on the industry and draw audiences. 95% of Africans have never been to the cinema. So it is now official. The Kenyan National Assembly has just voted to impeach Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua. 281 MPs voted in favour of the motion, with 44 voting against it. Having fallen out of favour over the past year, he was criticised by both the opposition and deputies aligned with President William Ruto. In Nairobi, Bastien Renouille.
It's the first time since the establishment of the Kenyan Constitution in 2010 that the Kenyan National Assembly votes in favor of impeachment of a deputy president. All day, Kenyan MPs discussed the motion before listening to Rigathi Gachagua, the deputy president, during 2 hours. During 2 hours, he tried to convince them that he is not guilty of the 11 counts he faced. Among these counts, unjustly enriching himself, undermining the president's authority, or even meddling in lucrative state tenders. He pushed back on claims that he used 22 companies owned by himself or by proxies to amass a fortune of 36 million euros during the past 2 years, which is not compatible with his known salary, according to the National Assembly. He then added that the Constitution gives him a presumption of innocence in relation to criminal offences until proven otherwise in court of law. So he explained that he does not understand why he is judged by the National Assembly. But despite that, he did not convince the National Assembly. The MPs voted in favor of his impeachment. So what's going to happen next? The motion has to go to the Senate, and there is very little doubt about the outcome of the vote there, since the Senate is aligned with President William Ruto. So what will happen after the vote? Rigathi Gachagua is very likely to go to the court in order to stop his impeachment.
A truce between Ethiopia forces and the TPLF was signed almost 2 years ago, after 2 years of heavy fighting. A civil war fought mainly in the northern Ethiopia's region of Tigray that began when, after years of tension, the Tigray People's Liberation Front launched attacks on the Ethiopian National Defense Force. Hundreds of thousands of people died before a peace agreement was signed in November 2022. Today, rural areas remain heavily contaminated by unexploded ordnance. The ICRC with Ethiopian Red Cross say weapon contamination poses severe risk for civilians, especially children. Joining us from the International Committee of the Red Cross is Alyona Synenko. Alyona, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Can you please give us more or less an estimate of the number of casualties because of this ordnance?
Well, it is very difficult for me to give you an estimate of the number of casualties, which is also in itself part of the problem. In our physical rehabilitation centers last year and this year, we treated almost 400 patients that were victims of this unexploded ordnance. But this is just the tip of the iceberg, because we only get a fraction of people who actually become casualties of these devices, because they need to meet certain criteria. In these centers, we help them find mobility devices and learn to walk with these devices. But many people, they actually die, or they just have different type of injuries. So the people that we have treated is just a small fraction. But what is extremely concerning is that among these people, 80% are children.
So what kind of injuries are we talking about?
Well, we see a lot of lower limbs and also a lot of upper limbs injuries, and sometimes the combination of all of those, and that what makes physical rehabilitation for these people so extremely difficult. When I was in Tigray just a couple of weeks ago, I met a 17-year-old boy who he took one of these unexploded devices from a group of children that were playing with it, and it exploded in his arm, and now he lost fingers on both of his hands, he lost a leg, and it was extremely hard for us to help him find some mobility, because when he cannot use the crutches, he cannot hold on to anything. And even now that he can walk again, but still it's very difficult for him to find employment. So the needs for these people are huge.
But we're talking about physical injuries, but Serena, is not only physical, but also the psychological trauma.
We talk about physical injuries, we talk about psychological trauma, and we must not forget that the psychological trauma is not just for the people who became victims of these devices, but for the entire communities, for millions of people who live in weapon-contaminated areas. When we talk to mothers, they don't have a minute of peace of mind, because you have kids playing, running around these devices. Kids are curious by nature, so this is just a ticking bomb, and it is extremely difficult for these communities to live next to this danger every single day of their lives.
So, Alyona, what kind of support can we give them?
So we've been working to raise awareness among the communities, to try to promote safe behavior and help the victims of these devices, but it's not enough, because just to be able to eliminate this problem, these devices, they need to be cleared. And we've been trying to advocate with the authorities and also with the international bodies that places like Ethiopia should not be forgotten. Of course, today there are many priorities, a lot of things happening internationally, but if we don't put the necessary resources and also the political will to clear these areas, we will just continue having injured kids on and on and on.
And also, this dangerous environment enhances food insecurity in the region.
This problem affects every single area of life. People, they need to move around to fetch water. They need to be able to walk their farmland. They need to have to go to market. And when you have these piles and piles of dangerous, unexploded ordnance lying around, it just paralyzes everything that you are trying to do in a region that is trying to find economic recovery after a long and very difficult armed conflict.
Thank you very much, Alyona Synenko from the International Committee of the Red Cross. Thank you very much for shedding light on this issue. And now in other news, Mali is seeking to get more than $500 million in unpaid taxes and fines from Barrick Gold, the world's second largest gold miner. According to sources, the bill was mainly for retroactive tax adjustments and unpaid dividends. The demands on Barrick follow an audit of mining contracts last year, as Mali is trying to obtain a greater share of revenues into state coffers. Under a new code, Malian state and private interest could rise to 35% from 20%. And in Ghana, the practice of unlicensed gold mining has recently sparked street protests. The country's forests are being stripped away and their waterways are polluted by toxic chemicals known as galamsey. The wildcat mining has provided livelihoods for thousands of Ghanaians as the price of gold has shot up on global markets. But it's also causing widespread health problems due to unprotected exposure to those same chemicals. Brian Quinn has a story.
In southwest Ghana, a section of pristine forest stripped away, replaced by open pits whose mud is now filled with toxic chemicals, and men searching for gold. This is galamsey, the local name given to Ghana's now booming wildcat gold mining industry. While the practice has provided a livelihood for thousands, it has also polluted nearly 2/3 of the country's water sources and destroyed thousands of hectares of forest and cocoa farms. Many Ghanaians are now saying enough is enough.
Galamsey has to stop. All our water bodies have been polluted. They say water is life. When water is life and our water bodies has been polluted, how can we live long?
40% of Ghana's gold output comes from small-scale mines. In the first 7 months of 2024, they produced 1.2 million ounces, more than they did in all of 2023, as the price of gold on global commodities markets has risen by some 30% this year. As many as 8 out of 10 small mines are unlicensed. Their gold leaves behind the mercury, nitric acid, and lead used to process it, but it doesn't leave behind tax revenues, as most of it is smuggled out of the country.
The volume of gold reported to be exported out of Ghana is not the same amount up to the countries where it's going to, like Dubai. So it's an industry that is very informal and it makes it easy for organised crime to get involved.
The practice is dangerous for the miners themselves. Dozens have died in collapsing pits, with high rates of pulmonary diseases among miners and nearby villagers. Polls show Galamsey to be among the top issues for voters in December's upcoming general election.
The future of African cinema relies on Africa. The wise words of actor Idris Elba. He's attending the Africa Cinema Summit in Accra. For actress Juliet Asante, CEO of the National Film Authority, more needs to be done to draw audiences in a continent where the majority of people have never been to the cinema.
This year, we want to bring it back to how do we draw audiences, into the cinema, because as you know, Africa is over 1.5 billion people. And if you look at it, you can say that, less than, over 95% of Africans have never been to the cinema.
This is a rule of sharing and learning. I think it's fantastic that we're seeing an upsurge of African cinema on Netflix, on Prime, and all of that. But the future of our filmmaking relies on us, not those platforms. It relies on our own, what I like to call the rail, which is we have to have the distribution, we have to have the connectivity, we have to have the cinemas, what I call the bums on seats. We need people in the room to watch our programs.
Idris Elba to conclude our edition. Thank you for watching Eye on Africa. More news to come on France 24.